Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to FPCI Global Town Hall 2020 pre-conference event titled Ask Ambassador Vincent Piket Anything about EU Green Deal, EU-Asia connectivity, palm oil, after Brexit, digital transformation, Erasmus Scholarship, post-pandemic tourism, except about His Excellency's stroopwafel family recipe. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Willie from FPCI, and I will be your master of ceremony of today's event. I thank everyone who have joined this virtual meeting room, and I hope everyone is healthy and constantly blessed by God Almighty. I also would like to remind all participants to open up your camera to make this discussion feels lively. Ladies and gentlemen, the FPCI Virtual Global Town Hall 2020 will be convened in just 3 days. The conference will be convened on 20th of November 2020, which is this Friday. The Global Town Hall 2020 will be a global discussion which covers participants from different time zones, including Jakarta, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing, Brussels, to Washington, D.C. The conference had invited world leaders and most sought-after figures on this planet today. I hope everyone had received their one-time streaming pass and had invited friends and colleagues to the event. Ladies and gentlemen, this pre-conference event is aimed to capture everyone's excitement as we come closer to the virtual Global Town Hall 2020 and to provide a platform where anyone can ask anything to experts in their respective fields. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, there will be no keynote presentation in this discussion. We will dive in straight to the Q&A session. And as for now, I encourage everyone to submit your question in the chat box below. And Ambassador Vincent Piket will answer your questions later on. Joining with us today is His Excellency Vincent Piket, European Union Ambassador to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam. His Excellency is a long-time career diplomat who has served European Union since 1992. Today, Ambassador Vincent will answer any question you might have in mind. Ambassador Vincent, how are you?
I'm very well.
Thank you for joining.
I'm very well. Thank you. Selamat pagi to everybody.
And will be joining with us Dr. Dino Jalal, founder and chairman of FPCI, who will deliver closing remarks to conclude this discussion later on. And also with us today is our moderator, Mr. Reynaldi Hardiansyah.
Okay, thank you, Willie. Yes, so first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Ray, and I will be your moderator for today's Global Town Hall pre-conference event. I hope all of you are doing well and healthy, especially during these present times. And good morning, Ambassador. I hope you're doing all right as well. I am very excited, and I hope you do too, because we are going to have a fruitful discussion with Ambassador Vincent, the European Union Ambassador to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam. So I'm going to read his credentials first. Prior to his current post in Jakarta, Ambassador Vincent Piket was the head of the European Union Office to Hong Kong and Macau, the special administrative regions of the People's Republic of China, as well as the European Union Ambassador to Malaysia. His Excellency has been serving the European Union since 1992, as William has mentioned. Therefore, he has almost 30 years of experience in the EU's foreign affairs. So if you have any questions regarding the EU, Ambassador Vincent Piket is the right man you can ask. And of course, as many Europeans do, Ambassador Vincent Piket can speak multiple languages, such as Dutch, obviously, English, French, and also German. Therefore, makes him a very great diplomat. So with that, all of you are very lucky to be here today to be able to ask so many questions related to the European Union to the ambassador. And as we can see, we have a lot of questions already, and who are ready to shoot all of their questions. We have students, professors, researchers, business people, and a few government officials here as well. So thank you all for joining. So before we dive into the questions and answer sessions, please note the following guidelines. All participants are required to turn on your camera, but please keep your audio muted throughout the session so that the discussions can run smoothly. All participants may submit your questions through the chat box feature on the Zoom app, stating your name and also affiliation. And for our question and answer session, I will choose 3 to 4 questions per batch, in which Ambassador Vincent will answer the questions collectively before proceeding to our next batch. We will take as many batches as we can during the span of the next 50 minutes, so that hopefully everyone can have a chance to ask your questions. So to begin our first batch, please feel free to ask your questions and I will be selecting from the chat box. So now you may begin. Yes, so I think, sorry, bisa ke atas ini? Oh, okay. I think I'm going to start with Fania. Oh, sorry. Okay. So we have one question. Hello, good morning. If I may ask, what do you think are the impacts of Brexit to Indonesia and Brunei, whether it's directly or indirectly? Thank you. So for the second questions from Lucia from New York University, a lot of stories on how the human rights violations emerged during the pandemic situation happen all over the place. What will the EU do to take charge as the guardian of human rights and encourage concerted and coherent efforts at the global level to enforce human rights protection? So that's the second one. And the third one, in the ambassador's point of view, how is the settlement currently going of Indonesia's palm oil disputes with the EU? And yes, the ambassador.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. and I'm very grateful for the session in a week, I think, which is very exciting for FPCI, but also for us. Namely, we will have on Friday this global town hall virtual gathering, and I don't think anything like that has ever been done before. So I'm quite excited. If I look at the lineup of speakers, it's tremendous, and world leaders from east to west, including the EU's High Representative for Foreign Policy and Security, Josep Borrell. So we're very honored to be part of that global town hall and to be supporting it with a modest grant from the side of the EU, and I'm glad to be in this pre-event. It goes to show, I think, that debates about global governance, about foreign policy and security policy is something that has to be practiced all the time. It is not a one-stop shop where you go in and come out with the answers. No, global governance is something that is under continuous evolution and progression, and everybody has to contribute. Everybody, that is to say, countries and regional groupings such as ASEAN, such as the European Union, but also individuals, and each citizen is affected by foreign policy. So each citizen should try, to the extent that they can, to contribute to this debate. And let me say that FPCI is a wonderful institution to promote that debate right here in Indonesia. I've been here for a year now, a good year, and I attended the FPCI's annual conference in Jakarta I believe it was October or November last year. Now it was a thrilling affair, and I think I was excited by the enthusiasm that I saw from the students, young people coming from all over the place in Indonesia, joining up in this big conference hall in Jakarta back then. Close to 10,000 people were there. Now, that's not possible this year for evident reasons. We have to accommodate as institutions, as citizens. And then the next best thing is global virtual gatherings like coming Fridays and like this morning's meeting. So ask me any question. And the first question is, of course, it's a very topical one about Brexit and how this will affect Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam. First of all, to note, of course, that we don't yet know the final shape of Brexit. The future agreement between between the European Union and the United Kingdom is under negotiation. This is going to be a crucial couple of 10 days or so in that negotiation. We have to strike an agreement very soon because, of course, the result of the discussions, the result of the negotiation will have to be ratified on both sides, in the UK in the first place, but secondly also in the European Union. And in the European Union, that is a process that involves the member states coming together in the Council of Ministers. It involves the European Parliament, which has an important say, and with any international agreement of that sort, of that magnitude and depth and importance, it has to involve the 27 parliaments of the individual member states. So quite a decision process still ahead for this. And that's why we need an agreement soon. We can't wait until the 31st of December. Now, the future shape of the Brexit not yet being determined. So the answer I'm going to give has to be a tiny bit vague in some areas. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that the European Union, also after the UK has left, will have 27 member states, will have a market of 450 million citizens, consumers, will have an economy that matches that of the United States and of China in terms of GDP. It will have a very affluent consumer society, and it is therefore also a tremendously important, going to remain a tremendously important destination for global trade and a source of global trade. So if one relates that to Indonesia in particular, the EU at 27 has close to 24 billion euros worth of trade in goods at the present moment. That is going to stay. That is rock solid. It's very constant, with some dips, of course, now because of the economic slowdown in Indonesia as well as in Europe. But in a normal scenario, we will be bouncing back in the coming year and grow further. The EU remains the biggest trading bloc in the world. It is going to stay a very reliable, predictable, and fair partner to trade with for everybody. We're signing agreements, trade agreements with many countries, including we're negotiating the one with Indonesia. So, in short, I'm very optimistic that the impact of Brexit on the economic and trade relations with Indonesia, with Brunei Darussalam, is going to be very smooth and is going to be absorbed in the strength of and the quality of the trade relations as they are. They will grow. We will, once we have our trade agreement in place with Indonesia, that we have studies to show that this will boost the growth of trade, boost the growth of jobs in Indonesia, boost the GDP performance of Indonesia year after year. So a very healthy and motivating prospect, I think, will keep us closely interconnected. The second question about the impact of the COVID crisis on human rights and what the EU is doing about that. Now, first of all, of course, the observation is very correct. The COVID crisis has affected and put under pressure in some areas the rights of citizens and the rights of the human rights respect towards citizens. We know it all from our own private experience. Living under COVID is not an easy thing. Being isolated for protracted times in houses, in homes, in flats is not an easy thing. There is for the individual, but also for families and for people living together. So there is a fairly consistent reports of COVID having led to an increase in domestic violence and abuse of people, and particularly women have been suffering from this. Now, this is evidently something that we need to address. The second area has been the area of information. In any circumstance, information flows these days with the global social networks is vulnerable to disinformation, whether it's by individuals or by state or state-sponsored entities. That has caused damage to the rights of citizens. That has caused damage to the security of countries. So there too, we as law-respecting sovereign states and law-respecting union like the European Union, we have to take action because this is something that is just not acceptable. So on both fronts, the EU will propagate and stand for a very proactive and positive discussion internally, and we are doing that. We have published a paper on the respect for human rights in the COVID circumstances. We have looked particularly also from the position of women, of young people, of children in this connection, and member states have discussed this in the EU level and are taking this forward at their national levels. One thing to say is, of course, it's a home truth, but it has to be said. And of course, the best solution to human rights violations and lack of respect for human civil liberties during COVID is to solve the COVID pandemic. And so that is for the EU, of course, the bottom line. We can talk about that a bit later on in the discussion if there's an interest. But coming on top of the crisis is the key goal that we have right now inside the European Union through all sorts of medical measures and through support, mutual support amongst member states, and through the investment in vaccine research. And as we have all read in the past 10 days, there is a glimmer of hope on the horizon with the announcement that 2 vaccines have been proven to be very effective. We're not yet there, evidently. The final trials and reports and analyses have to be done. Then there's a process of the approvals by the pharmaceutical authorities of the EU as well as of other countries. But we may be inching forward towards a solution on that score in the foreseeable future, and that should give us hope. Palm oil. This is, over the past year and since I've been here, this has been, of course, a topic that was discussed in, I think, virtually all of my official meetings with government, with parliament, with the business sector, with the palm oil producer associations. NGOs have come to see me and discuss, and I've gone to see them as well. So there is no person who is more convinced and has a clearer mind than me, I think, that this is a top priority for your country, for Indonesia. And understandable, this is a big sector in your economy. There is 17 million jobs in the palm oil sector, and of course many of these are in the more remote regions, where the jobs have been in the palm oil sector have been a key tool for poverty alleviation, for livelihoods, and for creating incomes. So we're very, very clear on that. At the same time, I'm convinced that there's a lot of misunderstandings about this dispute between the EU and Indonesia. I often read in the media and I hear that people say that there's a palm oil ban imposed by the European Union. I can tell you very, very straightforwardly, there is no EU ban on the import of palm oil into the EU. And I can prove that with the figures. They're up on our website anyhow, from the Eurostat statistical agency of the EU. Palm oil imports into the EU have been fairly constant, with some fluctuations as a result of demand and as a result of the price of palm oil. Sometimes there was more palm oil, crude palm oil, sometimes more biodiesel made with palm oil, but the trade has been flowing, and very, very constantly. It's about 8% of the overall trade volume of the export of Indonesia into the EU. And why is there so much palm oil going to the EU? That's because our market is open, and that's because we have the lowest import tariffs for palm oil all around, so much lower than anybody else. India, China, you name it. The EU has the lowest import tariffs. So what is the issue about? It's not about import of palm oil in general at all. It's about the use of palm oil to make biodiesel. There, the EU science and the EU lawmaker has determined that biodiesel made of palm oil currently does not meet the sustainability criteria under our renewable energy policy. Now, what does that mean? First of all, I'll tell you what it does not mean. It does not mean that biodiesel made of palm oil cannot enter the EU. It can enter the EU. What it does mean is that member states cannot use biodiesel or biofuels made of palm oil as part of their calculation towards meeting their obligations on cutting CO2 emissions. So it is entirely linked to that very specific point. And now, Indonesia and Malaysia argue that the EU has been incorrect, that our calculations have been wrong, and that as a result there is an unfair discrimination against palm oil, biofuels made of palm oil, imposed by the EU. And for that reason, Indonesia and Malaysia have gone to the WTO to file suit against us. Now, that suit is ongoing. There have been hearings. There's now being studies being made by the dispute settlement panel of the WTO. It's for us now a wait and see mode what they come forward with. But what I can tell you is that yes, we have a dispute, but we have the WTO to rule on it, and the EU will implement whatever decision comes out of the WTO. And that is our commitment under WTO, and that is our commitment also towards, you know, the fair trade relations with Indonesia as well as Malaysia. So WTO is one important track to solve the dispute and to come to a settlement with Indonesia. Add one other dimension, and that is the larger dimension about the sustainable use of the natural resources globally, in connection with the SDG realizations, Sustainable Development Goals, in connection with the Paris Agreement on cutting climate CO2s and stopping climate change, and we have the biodiversity dimension as well, and the worry amongst many people that palm oil plantations creep into natural forest and lead to deforestation. Now that's a larger debate, which we haven't solved yet. We have to look at that in earnest with our main partners, Indonesia included. And I think that we are on that score, we will also be moving into a better dialogue between us by setting up a working group that will objectively assess these matters and come to hopefully to a consensus about the sustainability of palm oil and other vegetable oils in connection with biodiversity, in connection with the climate, in connection with the maintenance of the forest. So I think we're moving towards a dialogue mode, and whereby I say that that if you dialogue, then you're no longer in the quarrel mode, and we hope very much that we can reach a positive outcome of this dialogue. And that is not just for the sake of palm oil, but it is for the sake of the green partnership that the EU wishes to establish with Indonesia for the long run. We want to see and work with Indonesia as a partner, an equal partner on this debate. And we can come back to that discussion in the course of this webinar.
All right, thank you, Ambassador. And I'm pretty sure that you have a lot of questions about palm oil. But yes, and I would like to remind the others as well, since there are so many questions and we only have a limited time, I would like to remind the others to keep your questions simple and short so that the ambassadors can answer as many questions as he can. So for our next batch, I will read 3 more questions from Philippus Michael Priyonugroho from Airlangga University. A question that he would like to ask lingers around the climate change issue. As we know, Indonesia is one of the largest greenhouse gases emitter and plastic polluter in the world. So in your capability, how will the EU address Indonesia's status regarding its climate change actions and policies? Thank you. And for next questions from Nurul Aulia, Universitas Sriwijaya. What are the challenges for fishery industry that need to be addressed by Indonesia in order to maximize the market in the EU? And next, we have Laisa from Universitas Gadjah Mada. How does the relevance of the EU Green Deal for EU-Indonesia relations, especially with regard to the dynamics of Indonesian palm oil diplomacy? Yes, thank you.
All right. Now, first of all, the question about climate and climate policy, and the discussions between Indonesia and the EU on these topics. I think what the I can't remember the name of the person who asked the question, but what the observation is correct, that Indonesia is an important emitter of CO2, but secondly, I would say that from our perspective, we see also a lot of positive movement by Indonesia in addressing it, and I say that also on the basis of discussions we had just in the course of this month, and late last month, October, in the framework of the Climate Diplomacy Week that the EU and the EU embassies, the embassies of the member states organized in Indonesia. Everything virtual, not a single carbon CO2 was emitted by our movements. But what struck me is that, first of all, of course, Indonesia, if you look at the Paris Agreement, it follows a path, a very rather cautious path in terms of the targets that it has taken upon itself under the agreement. And but we certainly see that there is a capacity and a willingness of the government to go further and to go better, and to raise over time the CO2 emission cuts targets to a higher level than is committed right now. So that's a very positive political observation from our side. Now, how do you do that? Of course, it requires action, it requires legislation, it requires rule setting on emissions, on the use of energy, on the promotion of renewable energy, and on the preservation of peatland, and etc. Rule setting, very important. And secondly, it requires concrete action and investment. Now, on both topics, rule setting and investment, and for concrete work, the EU is keen to work with Indonesia on rule setting with pride, but also with objectively, I can say that the EU has gone very far already. Our history goes back a bit longer than does Indonesia's in this regard. So we have learned a lot about what works and what cannot work, or should be changed in order to make it work, etc. So we have learned a lot already, and that sort of know-how is something we are sharing with Indonesia already, and we want to share it a lot more. And in order to try and support Indonesia in upping its game. The second aspect is investment, is in concrete action. Now, this is a discussion which we have already had for a little while, and there's quite a lot of very exciting and good projects ongoing, funded by the EU member states, in various places around the country. We have, for instance, we support municipalities in the drawing up of climate action plans, and I attended a webinar with 7 or 8 of such municipalities that have done so. Now, a municipality in Indonesia is often 1 to 3 million people, so it's not like in Europe that where a city of 150,000, 200,000 is considered middle-sized. So here you immediately can reach a good critical mass, and we're doing that on on various places in Java, in Sumatra, in Sulawesi. We have partners in Sumba, so quite exciting work is going on there. Also very practical at the grassroots level, if you like. We're working with local communities, with towns that wish to manage their village and town funds in a way that is supportive of sustainable livelihoods. Very, very practical and very, I think, motivating for me as the EU's representative here to see the enthusiasm with which people work, municipalities, the regencies, and so on. So very clear and simple and straightforward examples that we can do a lot together. Now, we have to go further. We have to mobilize, in my view, a lot more the business sector in Indonesia and also from the EU in this debate. And there are right now 1,100 European companies based in Indonesia. They employ about 1.5 million people, and that is 99% Indonesians. Those are not people from Europe. 99% of the employees are Indonesians. So so with the European business sector here, which is totally attuned to the green and clean and sustainable business practices from Europe, we can bring an awful lot of know-how to Indonesia. And if you combine that know-how with lending from the EU, the European Investment Bank, the world's largest development bank by far, much bigger than anybody else, member states lending banks, all very keen to lend to green projects in transport, in energy, renewable energy, in the preservation of biodiversity, and so on. We can do an awful lot together. Waste, I should mention, there's a number of very, very good and practical projects on dealing with waste, reducing waste in the first place, but then also recycling and the use of waste for energy. So that is vital. Now, one point of caution, and that is the energy sector, crucial for any climate policy. I think there we still have a long way to go in the EU. We're by far not as renewable as we have to be in the EU. It takes time, it takes investment. Some of our member states have a history of high reliance on coal, for instance, and so they will need to make a transition path that is deep and long. In Indonesia, we will see something similar. There's a strong presence of coal, and in other words, discussing the role of coal and the phasing out of coal will be very important. It will be difficult. It's not easy. We know that from our own experience. I remember myself that how coal mines in my home country, the Netherlands, when they were closed and what it meant for the local employees and for the local society. But it is a track that one has to pursue with all proper caution and consideration. So that's on the climate. I take the third question about the Green Deal. linked to that, because it is linked, evidently. And well, many of you may already know that the Green Deal is the big EU strategy for making the EU's economy and EU society climate neutral, carbon neutral, I should say, by the year 2050, with various steps in between, starting, of course, the year 2030, which is a step, a benchmark moment for in connection with the Paris Accord, where the EU will aim to be cut CO2 by 55% already compared to the year 1990. And in 2050, we aim to be climate neutral, carbon neutral, with all sorts of policies for transport, energy, the food sector, etc. Now that's great, and we are proud of that. We are determined. It won't be easy, but it will happen. I bet you that. However, we recognize, of course, that the EU produces only 7% or so of global CO2 emissions. So even if we realize our goal on our continent, we do not yet realize the goal in a global context. And it is for that reason that we are seeking partners around the globe. Now, two partners have emerged already. And one is China, which has said also that it wishes to be carbon neutral by the year 2060, so 10 years later than us, but still. And the second one that has said so is Japan, 2050, carbon neutral. So those are two big economies that will be pursuing the same goal. Now, we're looking evidently also to the United States, particularly after the election, and we have the expectation that that the United States will re-engage with the global climate agreement and will be a strong partner for us, but also for others in cutting CO2 and meeting similar goals of climate neutrality within the next 3 or so decades. So the US will be a major partner for us to work with. But I'm sitting here in Jakarta, Indonesia, of course, and it is very, very clear that with its size geographically, with its population size, with its goal of becoming a high-income country by the year 2045, with its biodiversity, with its forest, with its oceans, Indonesia is a top priority for the European Union to work with. And for us to realize as EU our Green Deal, we have to realize a real partnership with Indonesia, very close partnership that is sensitive to the issues that exist and to the transition that Indonesia is going through and will have to pursue over the coming decades. But a partnership with Indonesia is evidently something we will be pursuing, and I expect that in the coming 2, 3, 4 months, we'll be making good progress on kicking that off. Fisheries challenges. Well, I would say there's a few. First of all, on sheer trade challenge is that I receive very frequently, too frequently, I'm afraid, notifications from the EU's Food and Veterinary Office that shipments of Indonesian fish and seafood products have been intercepted for reasons that they don't meet certain standards. Too much contents of chemicals, bacteria, and similar things. Of course, the authorities, the relevant authorities of Indonesia are informed of that. But it goes to show that we have to do something about that, and particularly, of course, that the relevant authorities of Indonesia have to work on quality and sanitary and standards in the fishery sectors, from the ship to the shore and beyond that. Now, that is something we have been discussing with the Minister of Maritime Affairs and Fisheries, and we are busy putting in place some technical expertise to help raise the standards. And once we do that, I think we have a much more predictable picture in our trade on fish and fisheries product with Indonesia than we have now, and that's good for livelihoods in Indonesia. The EU is open for fish. We like fish, and we have too little of it ourselves, so there is no issue about tariffs or what have you. The second point I would make is something. It's based on what I saw myself when I made a visit to North Sulawesi, visiting communities along the shore of the mainland of the island, but also on some of the small islands. Local communities, villages of 1,000 people, 300, 1,000 people, and very, very highly dependent on what they catch from the sea. Now, what was the problem? The problem was that very frequently the local communities did not use their habitats, the maritime habitats, in a sustainable manner, and using methods and dynamite, etc., to catch the fish and destroying the coral and so on. So that is something that would harm their livelihoods for the long run. And the second thing we noticed is that very often the capacity of the local communities, the fishermen, to keep the fish cold and chilled and frozen throughout the chain of catching and processing and preparing for the market. That was also a big issue. So what we do, therefore, is in that particular region is have projects to support the local communities to fish in a sustainable way, to responsibilize, so to say, them in the management of their natural maritime habitat, and to help them develop cooling and freezing capacities that allow them to keep the fish in a better shape and before it reaches the market. So a very, very practical and very positive experience there, and again, it's an area where we wish to work a lot more together with Indonesia, maybe also with the help of a loan from the European Investment Bank, because this is a bankable sort of project, as we say, bankable. So it might be very well doable to sign a loan for that as well.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And for our next batch, we have 4 questions, and the last 2 questions are kind of related. So the first one is Luluk Atika from Universitas Wahid Hashim. How is the European Union NATO cybersecurity and defense cooperation the latest upgrade in facing threats in the future? So how is the EU and NATO cybersecurity and defense cooperations facing the threats in the future? And the second questions, we have James Purnomo. Considering that there are increasing geopolitical tensions between the China and the US, do you think the European Union can potentially join and push for free and open Indo-Pacific to include an economic dimension? And for the third questions, in your opinion, what kind of suitable post-pandemic tourism design for Indonesia, European Union? And for the last questions, Endang Hadiana from Mataram Islamic University. As the tourism sector is complicated, which is mostly the human resource nature based in Indonesia, how can we innovate sustainable human resource management on strategical and practical views in the post-pandemic? Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, EU-NATO. Yeah, I mean, cyber threat is something that unfortunately the world has come to face with increasing intensity over the past 5 years even. So it is a major concern for everybody. Concern within the EU's security policy. Well, it's one of the areas of work that has been identified as a priority for us, and as well, and we are working with NATO. NATO is not the EU. Not all member states are a member of NATO, and there are countries who are member of NATO who are not member of the EU. So. But NATO is a partner, and in these matters they have capabilities that the EU itself does not possess, and for that reason we have worked up a cyber security action line to help protect us against the threat and to increase the capability of both of us in addressing specific cases. So this is a growing area of work for sure. It's also something that could be of interest in the framework of the EU-Indonesia relations. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had our annual security dialogue, Indonesia-EU, held virtually, and cyber threats were discussed also on that bilateral framework, and we expect that we will be elaborating a line of cooperation with Indonesia on this as well. Geopolitics, USA versus China, and EU's point of view on the Indo-Pacific. Now, I honestly think that in this topic, Indonesia and the EU are very, very much like-minded. We have seen a rapid impairment of the US-China relations over the past years. It may change in the coming period. We need to see, but some of the underlying factors will not easily go away. This rivalry and of economic and political nature. Now, like Indonesia, the EU doesn't want to be caught in that rivalry. We need partnership with both USA and China for different reasons, for different things, different backgrounds and so on. And we definitely don't want to be forced to choose between one or the other. That's not our political inclination, that we believe in a multilateral framework for global governments, and as part of that, you don't choose one partner as against the other. you know that you have to work with all in order to promote the common global goals. So I sense that Indonesia is very much on a similar wavelength, and for that reason I have the feeling that we can definitely have a very profound discussion and dialogue with Indonesia on how we can mutually support this multilateral framework for governance. Now, we can definitely relate that to the Indo-Pacific region, for which several countries have produced a strategy, and so as has Indonesia, a strategy that was endorsed in the ASEAN context, and here I think we do believe that ASEAN is a vital partner for us as well. At the end of the day, ASEAN and the EU, we are different, of course, but we have similar inclinations, objectives, and goals of cooperation and integration amongst our membership. So I expect that on the topic of the Indo-Pacific, the EU will be able to work very closely with Indonesia, and likewise we will be able to do so with ASEAN. As a matter of fact, on the 1st of December, there's the EU-ASEAN, or ASEAN-EU, I should say, foreign ministers meeting, and where the topic of the Indo-Pacific will be on the agenda. So watch that space. I hope I heard the third question correctly, and it is, did I hear it well, that it is about tourism post-COVID? The third question was about tourism, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right. It's a good question, and of course all of us as individuals, we long for going on holidays and to resume our travels and go spend some time. In my case, in Indonesia, discover the islands further, and maybe some of you look forward to spending some time in our ASEAN countries in Europe. And of course, right now we are hindered from doing that. Now, how can we overcome that? Of course, first of all, it goes back to what I said at the very start, that we've got to get the pandemic under control. That is the bottom line. We have to accept that for some time, 1 month, 2, 3, we will again face, certainly in Europe, social restrictions and medical restrictions. But we have to do that in order to get to flatten the curve and to bring it close to acceptable levels. The vaccine, again, is going to be vital, and I would think that without a sustainable vaccine policy and without widespread vaccination, not just in Europe but everywhere, we will not have a sustainable resumption of what we used to do. Now, many people say what we used to do is not going to be possible post-COVID anyhow, and there is a sense in that I think that what the crisis has shown us is how vulnerable certain parts of our economy, certain parts of the way we live, how vulnerable these are to a pandemic that knows no borders that will rampage through the world, even whatever we do, and it's come back. So we have to think as societies very hard about what this means for the way we live, for the way we pass our time, for the way we spend our money, for the way we travel, and so on. So I do expect that you see it starting already now, but certainly that once we have the crisis under control, we will have a very fundamental rethink of such all these aspects. It applies to tourism, but it also applies to anything else that we do in our daily lives, and what our societies, for how we function as societies. Will we ever return to public transport in the way we used to use it before the crisis, or will we more and more pick up our bike and as many people, certainly in Jakarta, have started doing. Even myself, I took the bike together with a number of EU ambassadors, the Nordic ambassadors, to ride to work. So I think that reflection is going to come, and it's a good one. I relate it also to the climate and the green agenda. Our societies, our governments are spending billions and billions, if not trillions, of euros, of rupiahs, of US dollars on fighting the recession resulting from COVID. It's necessary, but the fact of the matter is we are borrowing massively to do that spending and to keep people at work. And we are borrowing, of course, at the expense of the future generations who will be saddled with a debt as a result. Now, the question we have to answer is whether or not the money that we're spending now, that we're borrowing from the future generation, that we're spending in a future-oriented way. And for that reason, the EU is trying to answer that question by saying, yes, we need recovery, but we also, at the same time, we need to think about the green agenda. In other words, we have to make sure that our recovery is green, and that we, while protecting livelihoods and while temporarily subsidizing wage bills of companies and similar things, we at the same time make our spending sustainable, offer sustainable goals that are positive for the future generation. Because you can spend a rupiah only once, you can spend a euro only once, and for that reason we have to be very forward-thinking about that. Tourism is of necessity for most of us an activity that involves movement by car, by plane, and so on. So special considerations have to be made there. Many hotels in Indonesia, I have the impression, at least the ones that I've been hearing of, are very keenly aware of the role that they play in the local community, in the local natural habitat, for very obvious reasons. That if you have a hotel in a beautiful island and your beach is dirty, and if there's sewage floating into the sea, then of course no tourists will come and visit you. So consumer demand, in other words, will probably be one of the drivers of change in the coming period, and the consumers saying to the economy and to their governments, we don't want this to happen anymore. It's not worth it for us to spend money on, and we have to move to a more sustainable and green mode of operation. Now, human resources, This is the country of human resources. I often think close to 30% of your population is young, is below 30, and there's many people coming out of education sector each and every year. Two things to say. First of all, of course, now students at university level, but particularly at secondary and primary level, are very much handicapped by the fact that we can't have classical physical face-to-face education at the moment. This is not good for your social interaction. This is not good for social development of kids, and it's not good for learning. There's what UNICEF calls a learning loss right now. So we have to study, countries, EU as well as Indonesia, study very closely how we can keep schools open responsibly, or reopen schools responsibly, in universities for the same thing. Second point, sustainable human resources are, it's a very good topic, but at the end of the day, partly it's public policy, partly it's the role of citizens to be sustainable, and as human resource, as worker, as student, and so on. So we have to think ourselves, I think, as individuals. What can we contribute? What role can you and I play in promoting sustainable practices at home, in school, in the company, in a diplomatic mission? And so that is I think a global debate, a global thinking process that we need to engage in, and that I'm very keenly aware also of myself. I think coming Friday and the global town hall hosted by FPCI, and so I think that's one of the key things that I see ahead as for public policy to promote. One last comment on that. It requires critical thinking, and that's each time I speak with students, I always say, and it's not because it's you or somebody else, I always say we need critical minds today, critical minds that think independently, that receive information, judge it, evaluate it, judge it, that information, and come to sensible, objective conclusions. That is what we need right now. We live in the age of the battle of information. Social media, in particular, are very, very powerful, and we have to, in other words, arm ourselves as individuals in handling the use of such media and handling the information that comes out of it. And for that reason, I do think that students have a particular role, a responsibility to be critical and to be independent thinkers, and to promote debate, open debate rather than a closed debate, for the good of your development, personal development, also the development of your society.
Yes, thank you so much, Ambassador. I would agree with the last part. And I know that the time for the Q&A has passed since it's already 11, but we still have so many questions. So I would like to ask you if you would like to answer at least 2 more questions, or are you okay with that? Or
I'm okay.
Okay, yeah. Sure, okay. Thank you. So for our last 2 questions, we have Fraka Dianjaya from Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang. Is there any possibility of the EU FDI for clean energy in Indonesia? As we know, Indonesia's source energy is still dominated by
Sorry,
fossil energy.
I apologize. There was a phone call coming in. So can you repeat?
Sure. There's a question from Raka Dianjaya from Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang. Is there any possibility of the EU FDI for clean energy in Indonesia? As we know, Indonesia's source energy is still dominated by fossil fuel energy. Yes, and our last questions, back to full circle to our first questions about Brexit. A few days ago, I was reading a news article in the Guardian about the Brexit talks. As it turns out that the 10 Downing Street still want to extend the Brexit talks. My questions from Universitas Udayana Timothy would be the extension of the Brexit talks is showing that European Union still unsure the implications of Brexit, or the European Union still need the United Kingdom in Europe.
All right. On the renewable energy and the potential for FDI, in that, yes. First of all, let me say there's tremendous interest from Europe, but also from other parts of the world, in investing in renewable energy, and there is. That's because the potential is enormous in Indonesia. We know from Europe that renewable energy is competitive compared to fossil fuels, fossil-based energy, and so and that point is going to come also in Indonesia. So we are keen to develop that, and the European companies are keen, both those who are already in Indonesia and those who no doubt will come to Indonesia. We will have possibility of lending, again, the European Investment Bank and the development banks of member states. So all sorts of positive factors. One important thing, and that is we need a regulatory framework, a legal framework that promotes renewable energy. And now there's a renewable energy bill being discussed in the Indonesian Parliament. So the debate is ongoing. We have provided technical expertise to the government, to the commission, Parliament Commission that is discussing it. It was their request, and because we know from our experience that if you do not have a good legal framework for renewable energy that sets renewable energy, often with independent power producers, could be a firm, could be even an individual, with a solar panel on their roof. If you don't have a good legal framework to promote that, then you make progress very slow, if it is possible at all. So that is, I think, the critical moment, the critical task for the authorities of Indonesia to reflect on is how to promote that and how to deal with the vested interest of the incumbent producers. We had exactly that debate in Europe as well a little while ago, not too long, but at a certain moment the knot was cut, and which allowed renewable energy production to take off in the real sense. So that is a condition that I hope will be met soon, and then I'm 100% sure that the domestic investment for Indonesian firms and foreign investors will come. Last question about the Brexit talks. Look, this is a negotiation at a crunch moment. and and you will hear a lot of it about it in the media. People will say different things about it in the media. But I'm not going to comment on that, and except by saying that the EU is totally committed to trying a strong agreement, ambitious, and also one that is equitable, and with the United Kingdom, which will, of course, remain an important partner for us in any circumstance. Will the EU survive the Brexit? I think that was a little bit the undertone of the question. Are we having second thoughts? No, I think we have no second thoughts about the path we've taken after it became an established fact that the UK would leave. It was politically, the EU has absorbed this question, this fact. It's not a matter of a lot of debate. And what we're after now is trying to strike the best possible relationship between us and the UK for afterwards. And our principles are very, very clear. We're very transparent about how we approach the negotiations, started right at the beginning up to now. High degree of transparency within the EU, within the among the decision makers, between the EU and level and the member states, parliaments, etc., etc. And we've been very, very transparent to our negotiating partner, the UK. And our approach will not change. We believe we are on the right track. We have the right tonality and the right objectives. And we do hope that that we can convince our British partners that there needs to be compromise on some of the key issues. But that's entering into the negotiation, which I don't want to do. And we are hopeful that we can maintain a very close link economically and politically with the UK. Much of it is just sheer common sense. And so for our citizens, for travelers, for people who want to bring their pet across the channel in either direction, for people who want to study and work on either side of the channel, and the same for trade. And so we hope that deal can be struck, and that afterwards we will be in politically waters that are politically a little bit more quiet than they are now.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Vincent Piket. That was very insightful discussion, and I believe that all of us here have learned a lot. And I know that we have so many questions left, but due to time constraints, we have to stop right there. And on behalf of FPCI and the audience here today, I would like to extend our gratitude to the delegations of the European Union to Indonesia that made this Global Town Hall pre-conference event possible. And of course, thank you so much to everyone for your delightful and thought-provoking questions to the ambassadors. I'll hand back to the floors over to our MC. Willie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ray, and our great appreciation to Ambassador Vincent, who have answered questions from our participants and shared valuable lessons, thoughts and ideas about Brexit, palm oil, SDG, energy, climate, free and Indo-Pacific, free and open Indo-Pacific, and also about fisheries. And ladies and gentlemen, before we say goodbye, we have joined with us Ambassador Dino Patijalal, founder and chairman of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, who will deliver his closing remarks. So Ambassador Dino Patijalal, floor is yours.
Okay. Well, am I on the screen? Good. Hi, Ambassador Vincent. How are you? Good.
Good are you? Very well, thanks.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. I'm just closing to say thank you for your briefing to our students. I want our students to know that the EU office, the EU delegation to Jakarta has been one of the most active partner of FPCI. A lot of people ask FPCI, why don't you work with this country, that country, and so on, but to be honest, the most active in seeking to work with us, one of the most active is definitely the European Union delegation in Jakarta, and he's very eager to talk openly with students, and he's done it very well. He doesn't reject or hide from any questions. So really appreciate the intellectual honesty. Soon we will have a global town hall on Friday, 20th of November. And I know all of you have registered, but please ask all the other friends to join as well. This is the first model and an innovation, because this is a working arrangement whereby about 12 think tanks from around the world, and they're all very prestigious think tanks. They work together to share their crowd and also share their thoughts and their thought leaders to discuss a very important issue. And this global town hall, if it's successful this year, we're going to develop it into a global town hall group with a fixed number of think tanks. Yeah, okay. Sorry. I'm here now. Yeah. Okay. So and we're gonna grow this to become a group with a growing number of think tanks and university partners around the world. So I'm glad that some universities in Indonesia have already expressed interest to work with us to grow this global think tank group. But a key idea is really to figure out of this most amazing and impactful crisis that we have, the COVID-19 crisis, how will the world change after? Because in every crisis, you call it 9/11, you call it the tsunami, you call it the World War II, every crisis produces change, because a crisis shocks people into thinking and behaving out of the box, right? So the question is, if the world is going to be free from coronavirus in 2022 or 23, which is very likely, will we go back to the world that was before the pre-COVID-19 world with all its shortcomings and problems, right? Or will it be a better world, right? Of course, still with conflicts and shortcomings, but a reform world, geopolitically, multilaterally, politically, economically, socially, technologically, and so on. So that is the big question. We don't have the answer to this, but we want to start the debate. And one of the things that European Union is ahead, and I'm not saying this because the ambassador is here, but really the question of how you recover in a way that achieve decarbonization of the economy, right? So there's about $10 trillion of stimulus. So people, governments committing money to reform and rebound, yeah? More than $10 trillion from the United States, from Europe, from China. Indonesia alone has, a couple of $1 billion, 644 trillion rupiah, and so on, right? But the question is, how do you do it so that this $10 trillion stimulus leads to a decarbonated world, right? Not to a fossil world, not to a dirty energy world, right? And to do this, you have to systematically place green strategy in your budget, in your stimulus budget. And to be honest, and this is really a source of great concern for me, out of all the countries in the world, right, only EU and certain other countries, yeah, has a green strategy in their recovery budget, right? Indonesia doesn't, the United States doesn't, right? And a lot of other countries in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, doesn't have this. And why is this important? Remember this formula, guys. Yeah, this is a very important formula for you to remember. Very simple. If you want to keep world temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius in the next 10 years, right? Because 1.5 degrees Celsius rise is seen to be reasonable, right? You can live with it. Then the world emission has to reduce by 8% every year from now on and the next 10 years, right? And thank God, because of COVID, world emission is already down 7.6%, right? Because people stop driving, people don't go out of their house, you know, the planes don't fly and so on, right? But obviously, when the economy picks up, can we maintain that minus 8% of emission growth for the next 10 years? I'm very pessimistic. I'm not usually a pessimistic person, but the way we live, and given the weak political will of our leaders, is going to be very difficult. The European Union has led the way, right? For some reason, they had a recovery plan with a strong green element, you know. So projects and investment has to meet green standards, right? Has to meet some kind of emission reduction or emission limitation standards, very strongly placed in that strategy. But unless the rest of the world does it, right? Unless President Biden does it for America as well, because Trump was very weak on that. Unless Russia does it or China does it. By the way, China is doing very well also in terms of climate program. Then we're not going to achieve that humanity goal to reach a limit of 1.5 degrees. So I don't want to talk long because we're going to talk all about this at the Global Town Hall. Once again, please register. Our target, we're about 6,000, is it today? Yes. We want to reach 10,000 by the end of this week. And I'm sure with all your help, we can meet that target, because that's a happy target for us to reach enough people to think about this big issue. Once again, thank you, Ambassador Vincent. I will see you at the Global Town Hall, and also next year, I know you will grace us with your presence a lot. So it's really a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bagdina. Thank you for the invitation, and FPCI is a wonderful partner for us, and we support your goals, and I strongly feel that they're very much supportive of the sort of debate we would like to have promoted in Indonesia. So thank you for this chance, and I wish you the very best for your Global Town Hall coming Friday. It's wonderful to hear that you have 6,000 people registered already, and I think you're going to make that 10,000. Good luck.
Terima kasih semuanya ya. Udah.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, now we have come to the very end of our event. However, before we say goodbye, ladies and gentlemen, we have two important announcements to make. The first one is that we would like to remind you that the Virtual Global Town Hall 2020 will be convened this Friday on the 20th of November 2020. And I hope that everyone can invite as many friends as possible, and also your colleagues as possible. You can invite them to register at our website at www.GTH2020.com. And the second information is that all participants that will be joining Global Town Hall 2020 will receive a free certificate. However, I once again must stress that you need to register yourself at our website www.gth2020.com in order to claim the certificate. With that announcement, ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to invite our committee, Rini and Afni, to take a few snapshots of all participants with Ambassador Vincent Piket. Yes, the committee. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please turn on your camera, as the committee will take us a few snapshots. Yes, I shall now assist with a countdown. 3, 2, 1. And once again, 3, 2, 1. Okay, with that, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, now we have reached the very end of our event. On behalf of FPCI and Global Town Hall Committee, I once again thank Ambassador Vincent Piket, Dr. Dino Jalal, our moderator, Mr. Ray, and all of the participants that have contributed tremendously during this discussion. We hope to see you again at FPCI Virtual Global Town Hall 2020 around the world, around the clock. Stay curious and stay safe. Goodbye.